a little about the Litvish Yidden come back to Yerushalayim, but also the Yekisher German Jews who come back to Yerushalayim. The healthcare in Yerushalayim in those days was an absolute disaster. Along came, in the late 1800s, a German Jew, very religious. German Jews who were religious at the end of the 1800s were generally from the philosophy of Reb Shimshon Hirsch. Many of them went to university, many of them had professional careers, but at the same time were very, very frum. And his name was Dr. Moshe Wallach. Dr. Moshe Wallach comes to Yerushalayim with an ideal. He's going to help the Yerushalmi Jews get good health care. What was health care like before Wallach came? The main hospitals that existed were missionary hospitals. And they had fantastic health care. But you're going into a missionary hospital, and they used the fantastic health care to try to get people, hey, look, we're not that bad. Come listen to some ideas we have. And Wallach, who does not have a hospital, he starts making house visits, and he starts providing top-notch health care, and his knowledge, his medical knowledge is phenomenal, but he's doing house visits, and it's not sustainable. So he goes back to Germany and Holland at some point, and he says, I'm raising money to build a hospital, buy a property to build a building, and it's going to be state-of-the-art facilities. And he literally goes from house to house, this doctor, quite a long fundraising trip, not for a yeshiva, not for a soup kitchen, for a hospital, a modern state-of-the-art hospital, Jewish-owned, that's going to be for Yerushalmi Jews on the outside of the old city walls. There was a primitive hospital inside the old city called Bikur Kleilim, which also eventually moved out and stayed primitive on the other side of the old city. And he's going to build this hospital. He collects, and he literally is collecting door to door. People are giving him like these small little donations. My father-in-law's family is a very famous Yakisha family, and they have a family tradition that they donated like whatever money they had to this ideal of building a hospital in Yerushalayim. Comes back, buys this property, and builds the original Shaarei Tzedek hospital building, and he's the chief medical doctor of the hospital. He owns it, he runs it, and for him it's a full facility. It's not only going to be the most modern medicine, but it's going to provide for all their needs. It's a huge property, which we're going to see on the other side of the property soon. It's still empty until today. He had a wheat field on the property, and he would make his own wheat. He also built a matzah bakery, and this would bring in money for the hospital. He had, we talked about Tnuva before, he had cows and a pasture on the hospital grounds, and he would have fresh milk, no matter what time, no matter when, no matter how, for the patients, which was very important, especially for young mothers who were giving birth at the hospital. And it would be Chol Yisrael, it would be kosher milk. He had the most advanced labs, but he also made sure that it was only kosher food. And then he wanted with this hospital that not only would it provide the best medicine, but it would be very Jewish, very religious, and providing for all the spiritual needs of the patients as well. And that balance was completely creative. It was original. No one had thought of that before. You're talking about someone who is a product of German universities, but religious enough that he was close with Chaim Sonnenfeld, and was one of the biggest people in the Eidach Haredis, and to a certain extent in the Tour Guide even. Okay, so he's an extremist and close to Chaim Sonnenfeld, but he also gets an award from the city of Yerushalayim in his old age about providing the best medicine and the best medical advances, and his labs produced discoveries and papers in medical journals to advance medicine for the people of Yerushalayim. And it didn't discriminate. Every type of patient was treated here. Arab, Jew, any type of Jew, it didn't make a difference. That's who he was. He was so devoted to the cause. He lived here in the hospital. He never got married. He died in the hospital. During the 1948 war, there were patients who, people got old and got sick and died, even though there was a war going on. Har HaZeisim was cut off. There is no cemetery in Yerushalayim. He allots a piece of property on the edge of the hospital grounds to be a cemetery where there's some people buried, which I will bring you to in just a moment. 10 years later, in 1957, when he dies, he's very old, he's about 90 years old, they bury him, even though that was only used during the war, they bury him in that cemetery because he gave his whole life to Shaarei Tzedek. On one of his fundraising trips, he hired a woman, another religious Jewish woman, Selma Stimiana or something like that, I remember exactly her last name, who was a graduate of a prestigious German nursing school. And she became the nurse. He needed to hire a chief nurse to run the day-to-day operations of Shaarei Tzedek. And he hired her. He saw she was professional, she was very religious, everything that he wanted. She also moves into the hospital. She also never got married, and she lived even longer than him. She eventually had an apartment in the new Shaarei Tzedek outside of Beit Vegan. She only died about 30 years ago. There are people doctors in Shaarei Tzedek till today who remember her. A wonderful lady. She was like a mother to the patients. She was a mother to the nurses. She was completely devoted. She used to work 18 hours a day at basically no pay for like this 65-year career, something insane. It was really an amazing dedication to the cause of providing the best medical care. So much so, when my father was a doctor, he worked here in Shaarei Tzedek, in the new Shaarei Tzedek, for the first year that we lived in Israel. He told me that a lot of the names of medical instruments in Shaarei Tzedek are German till today. They don't have Hebrew words for it. The influence of Balach and Selma, the Schweister Selma, Sister Selma they called her, is so felt till today that they still use certain German words for some of the medical instruments. Now, in 1980, the new building, which today is a massive complex at the edge of Beit Vegan, was dedicated. It was a major Yerushalayim event. The mayor of Yerushalayim was there. It was a very festive event when Shaarei Tzedek moved out of its original home and property, and it remained abandoned for many years. Just a few years ago, the Israeli Broadcasting Authority moved in, so now it's Israeli TV. So we went from medicine to TV, so now we can't go in. But just from the outside, we'll walk around the perimeter of the building, is the original Shaarei Tzedek, donated and dedicated with the small donations of German and Dutch Jews, and sustained with the dedication of people like Dr. Moshe Balach and Schweister Selma, because they outgrew it. They outgrew the facilities. So let's walk around.